welcome to Bury Our Bones With, the show that lives, breathes and dies the movies and TV shows you love. We are your hosts, me, Jimmy Murphy, and with me as always, the dark knight to my dimly lit Mr. Ryan Etherington. In today's show, we'll be burying our bones with the 1988 Tim Burton fairy tale as a haunted house movie, Beetlejuice. So join us as we peel off our rubberized batsuit, borrow Jack Nicholson's face paint, only to find out we're not home alone at all as we hang out with some stranger things.
Book your tickets now to see Michael Keaton's Tangerine Tambourine. Critics are calling it a show like no other. Playing the hit singles from the number 4 smash album, The Real Slim Caney. Such hits as Not a Lot of People Know That and Hi, My Name Is and Sweet 15. Michael Keaton's Tangerine Tambourine. Book now.
So, talk to me as to why Beetlejuice was the pick of the month here. What was the thinking behind it?
Well, Ryan, well, originally we were going to do it for Halloween and then we moved it. It really caught me off guard.
We got to kick off somewhere. I'll come in with a little bit of a spiel.
Cool.
So there we have it. Beetlejuice, 1988, Tim Burton. I have to say, my first time viewing the film for the podcast. Never seen it before. Always on the list, but never quite got around to it. So thank you for allowing me to achieve that goal that I probably never would have otherwise.
Are you glad you did? Or is it one of those goals that could have been left alone?
I'm glad I did, because now I know what it was that I was missing. I wouldn't say it's particularly something that I wish I'd seen sooner. I think again, there's a lot of positive points in here. I think it is very Tim Burton-y, which sounds like a stupid thing to say, but if you're not a fan of Tim Burton, there's going to be a lot you're going to have trouble with watching here. Yeah. But how about you? Obviously,
it's a weird one for me, because obviously we're going to do this podcast. And it came up. I was like, oh, let's do Beetlejuice. It's not a film I spend a great deal of time thinking about. Obviously, it's a cult movie. I think it's everyone knows the references and the touchstones of it. And I was trying to remember when I first came across Beetlejuice, because I would have been 8, 9, something like that when it came out. And I remember it. I remember everyone going on about it. I was probably too young for it when it came out. I've got a feeling I came to it after Batman, but I think I was aware of it. So it's really hard for me to put it into any real context. Like, oh, I've always loved this movie. This movie, I don't remember the first time I saw it. It's just always been out. And I got a feeling it was like, I was the right age for Batman, which is like a year later. I'm assuming they had made Batman when this was released, because there's only a year between the two. So I got a feeling it was like, oh, I'm the right age for the Batman movies. I love that. Oh, Tim Burton, the director, and Batman himself made this other film. I'm gonna watch that. And it's got like a lot of Tim Burton's films, they're kind of childish. They're fairy tales, really. They're like magical, and they're, and it has all that, but it's also like very adult as well. And there's stuff in there that could be described as problematic, quite frankly. You know what I mean?
It sits in that sweet spot of being old enough to feel like you're watching something you shouldn't, but not so old you're going to be horrifically scarred for life after watching it. That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that Tim Burton's really good at kind of dancing on that line of it being, this is a bit naughty if you're watching it and you're not of the age you should be. But it's not going to, it's not going to live with you, and you're going to be like, I can never watch that film again. It's scarred me. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because as I was watching it, I was like, oh, it's got a lot more sort of adult content in it than I remember. Like I say, some of it's quite problematic. And then I was like, they made a kid's cartoon out of this. There was, I can't remember how long it ran for. I remember there being a kid's cartoon, which is an odd thing. As I was watching it, I was very aware of it. And I was thinking, well, obviously, like you're saying, there's that sort of weird crossover age where young kids would have been watching it. It's like you say, it's a little bit too adult for them, but it's not so horrific. It's going to scar you for life. But some exec somewhere went, we should make a kid's cartoon out of this. There's some money in that or whatever, the usual motivations are. And that kept popping up in my head whenever there was like swearing or adult content in it. I was like, I don't know if that would happen now. I don't think you would get away with. I don't know what the rating was when the movie came out. I'm assuming it's a 15 in 88. I don't know if 12 existed.
That's right.
Yeah. But I mean, there's heavy themes throughout this film. Suicide looms quite large throughout the movie, and obviously there's lots of death. The whole film's about death, and I mean, the subtext is all about the preservation of innocence, really. You know what I mean? But I was like, I don't think if you took a movie with these themes now and went, we're going to make a kids' cartoon based off of it, I don't think it could happen. Which then like occupied quite a lot of my mind while I was trying to watch it. It's like, how does that decision get made? And it's interesting to me that now wouldn't happen, you know? The movie, sorry.
I was just going to say that the feel of the film is what I think appeals to the younger audience. It's the vibe you get when you're watching it.
It's like a cartoon, isn't it?
Yeah, that kind of that naivety that comes when you're young, as opposed to subject matter. I think if you lean a bit further onto the subject matter as opposed to the vibe and the feeling, suddenly it's a very dark film and it's a very not suitable for children type film. But as I say, this has kind of danced that line.
Yeah, and it's like a cartoon. It's like a Warner Brothers cartoon almost. It's the colours, the vibrancy, all of that sort of thing. With dark subject, it's that, like you say, it's that atypical Tim Burton movie. Like, you watch this, you know it's Tim Burton. You got the Danny Elfman score, which bizarrely, the moment it started, I went, oh, that's Danny Elfman, obviously, right?
Yeah, he's so entwined with Tim Burton. It's difficult to differentiate the two. Like,
I literally went, well, he did Batman. And then I started thinking, no, he does all of Tim Burton's movies. Oh, he did The Simpsons. It's that, all of a sudden, I never really think about Danny Elfman as a composer, but he's as much part of my childhood as John Williams is. You know what I mean? It's that, I don't think about him. I don't think about him that often, but that's his score. There it is. All of a sudden, you have that very visceral childhood reaction to the music, and it's that light sort of like, we're in for a fun time kind of movie. It's childhood popcorn to me, you know?
I think also with that kind of slightly off-kilter, slightly eerie, slightly creepy kind of feel to it, which, again, leaning into that becomes something very different, but again, dances that line between this is fun, this is upbeat, but there's something not quite right with it. It's kind of like a little bit off.
Dark circus music played by an orchestra, isn't it? It's that it's all up-tempo, but like you say, off-kilter.
The more you look at it, the freakier it gets. Whereas you just hear it and you go, that's quite a thing, and then you kind of think, hang on a minute, hang on. And
it has a touch of mystery and the unknown about it.
And I think
it's the Dutch lilt of music, you know.
Yeah. I think Danny Elfman is kind of a master at that, playing on that kind of, again, mirroring what kind of Tim Burton does on screen. He's very good at doing that for the auditory.
But it's like you're saying, this is the atypical Burton movie. To me, it's the best of Tim Burton. It's almost like he hasn't honed it or done it to death at this point. It's still fresh. It's still I think before this he'd done Pee-wee, something else that I can't remember. So it's very early in his career, and it has all of those elements that he does in everything. Thankfully, there's no singing in it. I have issues with musicals. I can't help it. They drive me mad. I think we may have discussed this on this podcast before. I can't stand it when people sing exposition. It drives me mental. I don't know what it is. It just really gets under my nerves. Yeah.
So then, how do you feel about, obviously, Beetlejuice being turned into a musical?
I won't be watching it.
It's funny because obviously I come from a very different kind of background where I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of musicals, but I like a musical when it's done properly. And the one thing that I thought throughout watching this was yeah, I can see why this was made into a musical.
Oh, it makes sense. Definitely,
it's got everything you kind of need for a musical. Don't get me wrong. There's a song that I can't remember. I think it's called "Guide to the Other Side," which is sung by Beetlejuice. And so after watching this film, I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense because he's not the person giving you the guide to the world. Yeah. But that's just my own.
So have you seen the musical?
I haven't.
Does it exist now, or is it coming out? Do you know?
It's been on Broadway for a couple of years. I think it's been in London. I don't know if it's on in London at the moment, but it's definitely a successful thing. It
definitely makes sense. It would definitely. I can see it lending itself to a musical. Really, it's perfect for it. But it's me and musicals. I like films, like the sort of musicals I can tolerate. The sort of musicals, like I say, where they don't sing exposition. So like the Blues Brothers, that's a musical, right? I like that film. I think it's good. I actually got a soft spot for Grease. I think it's a good movie. I don't think they sing exposition in that. They'll tell stories and they'll go back.
Yeah.
Like that's good. Rocky Horror Picture Show is a good musical. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think obviously Grease, there's some, you say about problematic, there's some problematic things in Grease there.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, God, there is in there.
It's frightening.
I keep thinking about, you've seen the Family Guy episode where they're like, hang on, what? You know, when Kanicki's singing, what?
It's quite funny. My wife was in a production of Grease.
She was. I came and saw it
4 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I'd properly heard the lyrics, because she was like, yeah, we're not going to be doing this verse. And I was like, oh, why is that? Then I looked at the lyrics and was like, oh, okay. That makes a bit more sense.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate for an audience.
No, it is, yeah. I remember your wife's performance of Grease. Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
I think we got back from the theatre and watched the movie afterwards. Me and my wife. Yeah, in case anyone's wondering, that Ryan's getting over, is it cold? Cough? You may hear some coughing.
Yes, it is. You may have also noticed that my voice has dropped several octaves in the past.
I've gotten 10% more actor.
So it's not just me going through puberty. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I've found a lot with watching this was how much it lends itself to other mediums. Like, it's one of the comments I made was the world it builds is more interesting than the film itself.
That's fascinating. One of my notes was, he builds a world, and it's all there, and it's instant from the get-go. Yeah.
And I think that's partly not necessarily why I had trouble with this, because it's a fairly enjoyable film. It's not too offensive or anything like that. Because there's been, as you say, there's a cartoon, there's a musical, everybody dresses up as Beetlejuice at a Halloween party. It's kind of ingrained in pop culture that I feel like there's more to it than there actually is. And actually, when you look at what everything has kind of developed from, it's like, there's actually not much here. It's very little.
Beetlejuice himself is barely in this movie when you really break it down. I mean, the movie's a lovely 120 running order. It couldn't be any longer. It's short, get out, sweet spot movies. I mean, as you know, I like movies around an hour and a half, hour 45. We were talking about this earlier. But Michael Keaton's barely in it. What I find really interesting is the movie starts, it goes off like a rocket. Within the first 10 minutes, they're dead. No, they've died. They know they're dead. You've had a first sort of rough glimpse of Beetlejuice. You've seen the sandworms. You know they can't leave the house. 3 minutes later, the family have moved in. So at 13 minutes, it's set. The movie's rolling, And I found that fascinating.
I think it's very difficult to kind of be in a position where actually that works. I think it does work here. I think, trying to imagine it with a modern guise and from a modern viewpoint, thinking, well, this would definitely be about half an hour of setup and
Character development
here's
of
here's
the
this
couple.
wonderful young couple who are really nice and sweet. Oh, now they've died. Now let's
Look
have
at this
20
quaint town that they live in.
Yeah, it's all. Whereas actually, as you say, it's like you blink and you miss it, and the film started. You know, it's very much like if you were in the cinema getting a Coke, you'd have missed. Oh, what's gone on? You've missed the whole kind of setup in 5 minutes, if that.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's like there's a really interesting bit. So like they set up the town. Like you say, he builds his world real quick. Set it up, they go out, they leave the house, spoilers, they die. What I found really interesting is one of those choices that people are talking of Dutch lilts is the moment the car crashes, they don't know they're dead at this point, but the car goes off the bridge, the very next shot is on a Dutch tilt. Something's now changed. Here's some peculiar, and then it just her fingers catch fire. They come round to the notion they're dead incredibly quickly as well.
And they're also incredibly accepting of it.
Very calm.
There's no kind of, what? I'm dead?
Yeah.
Let's have 15 minutes of me dealing with that.
Yeah.
No, it's, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it depends kind of, if you just kind of sit there and you just let the film wash over you as opposed to looking for anything more. It's always a bit difficult when you're watching it with the mindset of we're doing a podcast on it. But if you just let it absorb it as opposed to critiquing or looking too much into it, it works so much better. But as soon as you want to look for a little bit of reasoning or a little bit of logic to anything, it's very difficult to find. So you've got to really kind of allow it to just accept
I think it
what you're
works.
seeing as opposed to challenge it.
Oh, definitely. I think it works for this movie. I don't think that I don't think it would necessarily benefit from more in-depth character exploration. You know, it's like we all want to get to the interesting. Well, Tim Burton clearly wants to get to the weird stuff. We all know Tim Burton, but as an audience, we all want to get to the weird stuff. And it again, it is that it's set up like a cartoon. Like you don't get deep character exploration in cartoons, particularly. You know, so obviously there are different types of anime. And I think it really works. I think it just goes off like a rocket. There's no fat there. It's just keeps moving forward. Like there's a scene where obviously his name's spelt Beetle Guys, and they keep calling him Beetle Guys. And then when they finally decide to call him by saying his name 3 times, they say Beetlejuice. Unless I blinked and missed it, no one explained to them how his name was pronounced. They just changed the way they pronounce it.
It's just a point where they're playing, is it Beetle Guys, Beetle Geese, and then they stumble upon it. I think
I thought it was separated
very, very
out.
quick. I think there's like, it goes Beetle Guys, and then there's one other way of saying it, and then Beetlejuice, as if like,
is that right?
Light bulb sort of moment.
Right, yeah. But the opening scene, just it's interesting how you remember things wrong. Because that opening scene where it's going over the town, I remember that as being the model. It's all the model. It goes, and that model, and I'm watching it going, this model's incredibly detailed. Wow. And I'm watching it, and then there's a point where it clearly cuts to the model, and I'm like, right. Yeah.
I tell you what, it's quite funny. I had the opposite of that, not quite realising where the film was going. So I literally, I'm watching it, and it's the opening shots, and it's clearly a real place. Yeah. Then it has that bit, and I'm going, that is so bad. You can so clearly see that's a model, thinking they've just done it to save
some cash.
And literally, I made a note, really bad model replacement. And then it was like, oh, the model's part of that. I'll delete that last little bit there.
That's brilliant.
But I think that brings us quite nicely onto the plot. So for those who haven't seen, or for those who have and have forgotten what this film is about, so Adam and Barbara are a normal couple who happen to be dead. They have given their precious time to decorate their house and make it their own, but unfortunately a family is moving in, and not quietly. Adam and Barbara try to scare them out, but end up becoming the main attraction to the money-making family. They call upon Beetlejuice to help, but Beetlejuice has more in mind than just helping.
Ooh.
Very spooky sounding.
We've left you with a question. Yeah, I mean that sums it up. The idea is, it's weird, it's quirky, it's Tim Burton, and Beetlejuice is a disruptor. He's going to cause some chaos as they try to get this family out of their house by haunting them. Like you say, the world itself set up really well. It's really good. Like the whole it's not Book of the Dead. What do they call it? The Guide to the Afterlife, or the Guide for the Recently Deceased. I think. It's called,
that sounds about right.
And then it's all very admin based when they cross over to it's just like sitting in a waiting room. It's a really nice touch, and all the different ways people have died in there, played for comedy. And then they see their caseworker, and it's all very mundane, like the message they're driving, like, which I keep sort of coming back to, like there's death obviously reigns supreme throughout this movie, and suicide comes up a lot in this movie. And I was watching it yesterday, like with that sort of critiquing eye rather than just watching it. I couldn't help but wonder if like the message he's driving at here is like it's quite an anti-suicide movie, where it's like death in general is not going to solve your problems. The afterlife is mundane. It's more of the same, and it's like it feels like that theme just sort of prods along in the background underneath. Like the main theme of the film, I think, is probably that protection of childhood innocence. Like there's obviously loss of parents in there. Like I get the impression that Winona Ryder's character is depressed because her mum's dead. That's why she has that suicidal ideation. All of that's going. That would be, I think, the overarching theme. Obviously, it's that sort of hold on to that your childhood innocence. Like specifically when you get to the end of the film and it's all resolved, and she's more accepted. She doesn't go less. She goes like 10% less goth. It's like a merging of the two families, isn't it? Where it's like she's still kind of goth, but she's got some plaid on, which represents like Barbara and I want to say Tom. Is that his name? I forget now. And it's like, and she's done well in her exams, and it's like accept childhood, enjoy it, keep hold of that rather than rushing to cynical adultness. You know what I mean? That those sort of adult traits of cynicism and misery. Keep hold of your joy as you grow, and don't try to rush into it. Like I would say that was the main theme, and then underneath that it has that sort of like death is no answer to anything.
Yeah, I think it's interesting there. The kind of main thing I kind of get from it is that, it's trying to answer that question, what happens when we die? And the answer is far more boring than any of us could imagine. Kind of, I find that more interesting in some ways than when there's this whole elaborate thing and actually it's just like day-to-day life. Yeah. Go and stand in line, here's your ticket. There's a mundaneness to it that is actually quite endearing. Yeah. And actually, I think with Winona Ryder's character, as you say, she becomes about 10% more less goth. But there's subtly, I don't know how much would have been her or Tim Burton directing. It's kind of almost a way she kind of carries herself as well that kind of points you in that kind of direction of, the joy. Slightly more accepting of the world in which she's a part of.
She rejoins the world towards the end. If you think about it, the only time you see she views the world through her camera at the beginning. My entire life is a dark room, and then you never see her leave the house other than when she's in the front garden at the beginning. She's very isolated from the world. At one point, she's like, I have no one, I have nothing, and all of that sort of stuff. And then at the end of the film, she's getting off a school bus. She's rejoined society, and she has the parental unit she needs. And obviously, you have the main characters. At the beginning, don't have a child, and by the end they have a child. It's that real meshing. Everyone gets what they need. It's that proper fairy tale sort of thing. Like here's like the innocence, the child. Here's the sort of demon who lives in the wood, and here's the resolution. And it's like what's interesting is like she gains two parents but doesn't lose her other two parents. They just become one homogenous family on different levels. And like the mother's artwork's successful. There's a thing on the back, there's like a little hint that she's on some magazine for being a good artist, and the dad seems happier and she's happier. and what are they called? Barbara and Tom. I keep saying Barbara and Tom.
Adam and Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara and Tom. I think is Ever Decreasing Circles or The Good Life or something. Yeah. Adam and Barbara.
Yeah, you're thinking of the Beetlejuice episode of The Good Life.
The crossover. Yeah. And it's everything's tied up and resolved by the end, and it's that fairy tale happy end.
Yeah, it's kind of tied up with a nice, neat little bow, the way that kind of fairy tales do, where, you know, in the real world, how many families where there's, you know, two loving people and two not so loving people, let's just become, we just share this lovely child. The more you think about it, the less realistic it is, but it's just kind of wrapped up and neatly kind of presented to you as the happy ending that most fairy tales kind of present.
But it's interesting you were saying about, we're just talking about how, like, the what is the afterlife like? And as far as I'm aware, that's the first time I'd ever seen it depicted as so monotonous. I mean, obviously there's that whole we clo thing from the play, you know, hell is other people, Jean-Paul Sartre, and I believe that play is like 4 or 5 people sat in a waiting room of waiting to go on to the afterlife, and as the play pans out, it turns out this is the afterlife. You're stuck with other people. It's horrible. I think that's the point of the play. Don't quote me on it. But as far as like visual depictions in Hollywood and that, I think that like that's quite a refreshing way of looking at it. It's not like all clouds, it's not all demons, it's just like bureaucracy and normal day-to-day stuff. And that's quite an interesting concept to throw in, and possibly part of the thing that makes it so refreshing when you're watching. Like, that's clever, you know.
It's almost like a visual representation of that kind of gallows humour, where we're laughing at things that aren't necessarily funny, and you're looking at things with a kind of, you know, a naivety where you're going, it's quite kooky that they're all in a waiting room. They get given a ticket. Have you read through your manual?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of, oh God, here we go. We've got two newbies here. Don't know what they're doing. Yeah. You know, that kind of approach to it. And I think that's what carries a lot of the film. I think without that, I think it then becomes, to be fair, a lot like Tim Burton's kind of later work, where it isn't a whole lot of fun or lightness to it. One of the things I mentioned, that I've made note of when watching this, is it's surprisingly colourful for a Tim Burton film. And I say that because a lot of the Tim Burton films that I've seen are in that kind of late 90s, early 2000s period, where Sleepy Hollow and what's the other one?
Ed Wood. It's completely black and white.
Ed Wood. Well, it's very devoid of colour. It's very dark. It's very Sweeney Todd. It's not, even when there is colour.
I haven't seen Alice in Wonderland. I assume that's quite colourful, though.
Quite colourful, but that's a good. But
that's a lot later.
For me, when I think of Tim Burton, I think of those kind of. Even Batman to an element is quite dark.
Second one's quite colourful, but I take your point. It is quite. The content is quite dark of the second Batman movie.
I think, as you say, you know, it's Tim Burton before he got
too far,
and you know, same old tropes and same old tricks weren't boring. I think that's kind of a good barometer here, and that there's a lightness to it that kind of means that you can sit through the whole thing without going, it's a bit depressing, this.
Yeah,
you know, because once you do that, you've then got to have a really good script and a really good story, which I don't think the script is particularly great.
I don't know. I mean, I think the concept itself is so good. I think the script's okay. I think the script's good. I think the thing is, because it's an hour and 20, it's quick. It flies through. I'm of the mind that I think that works. I don't think it would work the same way any other way, but I could be wrong. But I think it needs to just be quick. It needs to just fly through. Like you say, if you had to go into depth on the subject matter, it would probably start, like you say, it's a different movie. You're going to have to work harder to pull things back. You'll be moving back and forth. Like, there is a lot of really pretty good just throwaway one-liners throughout this movie. They just throw them in, throw them out, throw them in, throw them out. And that just keeps it, like, bouncing along quite lightly. I think the script's pretty good. The concept's amazing. maybe the film's carried on the concept rather than the script, and its visuals more than anything that really happens in it, dialogue or character development wise, because there isn't
really any of that.
There isn't really character development other than you see them at the beginning and you see them at the end, and they're different. That's you see Adam and Barbara work out how to be scary. It doesn't work because they're just too nice. Interestingly, Alec Baldwin, almost unrecognisable in this film.
He's like a different person.
I'm like, is he a really good actor, or is this before he turned into Alec Baldwin? Do you know?
I think this is before he turned into Alec Baldwin.
Because he seems like a really nice person. It's really hard. He looks like a different person, and he's playing such a different character than what you come to expect from him, you know?
Yeah, he's just a run-of-the-mill nice guy, and I don't think anybody would describe Alec Baldwin as that. It's quite interesting. We're watching this, and we've got about half an hour, 45 minutes in there, where I say to my wife, "Strange to think that's Alec Baldwin," and she went, "Who?" And I went, "Him," and she went, "That's Alec Baldwin." I was like, "Yeah," and she was like, doesn't even look like him.
It's weird, it is strange.
I think there's like a point in his career. I want to say it's The Edge with Anthony Hopkins.
I haven't seen it.
He basically goes out into the wilderness with Anthony Hopkins, and they get attacked by a bear.
Oh, cool.
I'd
pay money to see that.
he has a beard in that, and I feel like all the films before, he's quite young. You know, like
post beard.
He plays Jack Ryan in Hunt for Red October.
Right.
He's in a couple of Glengarry Glen Ross. Quite clean, quite smooth.
Like
he grows a
British
beard
almost.
in The Edge, like 95, and he automatically becomes a bit more angry. And then post that, he becomes a bit more angry and a bit more Alec Baldwin.
A bit more Alec Baldwin,
Yeah. Well, I mean, moving on to the kind of facts, we've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent, but it's interesting. So at the time, it was given a budget of $15 million. And in its opening weekend, it made just over half of that back, with just over $8 million. Gross for the US and Canada, $74.5 million. And about the same as well for worldwide, which works out in today's coinage, today's money, about 155 million.
Not bad. That's just box office. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as I say, I think a lot of that is because it has that kind of... You don't need to think about it too much. You can. It's popcorn cinema. You know, films you to go and see with your mates. And it's just a film you put on. You know, it's not. It's never necessarily going to win any.
You're going to be rubbing your chin, sort of watching it. It's not like a neckbeard movie. No. Yeah. That's pretty good return, man. I mean, like I said, it's really hard for me to remember it in context. It was. I remember it being fairly big. Like, everyone knew what Beetlejuice was. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, what's that film? It's like, oh yeah. Beetlejuice. You know what I mean?
Think,
it was big.
I think a large proportion of that is because of that visual style. It's something. It's very easily recognisable, even if you've not seen it.
Yeah, so the Beetlejuice character is very, especially on the cover. He's got his like stripy suit on. Crazy white hair, and that ghoulish face paint.
It's iconic. It's almost a bit cliche now.
Yeah,
you know. And
I'm sure I remember people going, you know, that's the bloke who played Batman. It's like, yeah, I know. It's not that good a makeup, but it is. I suppose because the character's so far removed. You know what I mean? And
I think that's a really good return, considering that it's not a summer blockbuster. So it wasn't released. It was released March 30th, 1988. So.
Okay.
Well and truly in the middle of spring, so not at that summer level where, generally speaking, films do better in the summer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Is the spring box office? That's not the dead. Is that the dead? Is that where they just chuck movies? It's the dead zone.
I think the dead zone is kind of the fall. So
it's after summer. I'm
pretty sure
that's
like
what
September.
I think. Yeah.
End of August, September, beginning of October,
kids have gone back to
and
school,
then it starts becoming horror films, you know, and Halloween type. So
that's we'll throw this in just before summer. It should do reasonably well, sort of. Yeah, we've got I mean, the equivalent of Batman coming out in a couple of months. This is the placeholder. It should do okay, sort of thing.
That's right. Yeah. So obviously directed by Tim Burton, which we've kind of spoken a little bit about. It was written by Michael McDowell, Larry Wilson and Warren Scarron, who all worked on the screenplay. Produced by Michael Bender, Richard Hashimoto and Larry Wilson as well. Obviously composed by Danny Elfman, as we mentioned earlier. And the cinematographer was Thomas E. Ackerman. And I think it's quite interesting to say, if looking through a lot of the work that pretty much all of those people that I've just mentioned, they've all worked on pretty similar kind of films in that kind of same, quite slightly quirky, slightly kooky kind of feel to them. I think the only person who's really gone on to work on what I would call a wide range of different work is Danny Elfman, but that's more, I think composers generally will work on a lot more than producers and things like that.
Yeah.
Warren Scarron worked on Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Batman as well. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, a lot of them worked on this and then a few other things, and this was kind of like their main hit.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately,
this was the peak for a lot of them.
So Michael McDowell, one of the writers, Warren Scarron and Michael Bender were all unfortunately passed away within 10 years of the film being released.
Oh, no.
I think Michael McDowell, let me just look through my notes here, who is the main kind of prominent figure, in the writing. Apparently he was quite professionally and personally fixated on the subjects of death and dying, and actually received a doctorate in English literature from the Brandeis University with his PhD dissertation titled American Attitudes Towards Death, 1825 to 1865.
He sounds like a barrel of laughs.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where...
I think he gets invited to many dinner parties.
Apparently, he had a real collection of death-type memorabilia. You know, I know there was... in the Victorian times, there was a real kind of trend of taking normal pictures of people who have just died and posing a bit like taxidermy but with humans. Very odd, but at the time was considered very mundane and very normal.
But he had a collection of that, did he?
Apparently had a collection of all sorts of types of things like this.
Creepy.
Which again, it's interesting, we see that as creepy
and it's perfectly normal back
perfectly
then,
normal and probably to some people quite mundane.
Although it is creepy.
Bit weird. If you go around someone's house and say, "Have you seen my collection of Victorian death photographs?"
Got like a little photo album on the coffee table, and you just pick it up. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not Tenerife 1985, is it?
Yeah.
You know, but you know, so for him, I think obviously this subject matter was obviously quite close and dear to him, which kind of explains why there is kind of feels like there's a real love in the world that's created. You know, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is just something that's kind of written in half an hour and then passed off to a director. It does feel like something that's had a lot of time and thought put into it.
Yeah. I believe the original script's was a lot darker though, wasn't it, than what ended up on the screen. Yeah. So
I think that's why Larry Wilson and what's the other? And Warren Scarron came on, was to just, you know,
lighten it up
a little bit, because it's very easy to go dark with that kind of subject matter because it's naturally a bit of a taboo anyway. So you've kind of got to really lighten it up a bit.
Play it for laughs.
Come on, son, keep it light.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
But in terms of the cast, I think
stellar cast actually. Really, really good performances throughout, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you've got the main kind of staple names. You've got Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, and Michael Keaton. But I think it's got a really good supporting cast as well. You know, I think, who is it? Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara, who's kind of had a bit of a renaissance in her recent years.
Kevin's mum. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's in a programme at the moment with...
She was in Schitt's Creek, wasn't she?
Yes, and that's kind of been her renaissance.
Yeah.
But she's really, really good in this.
Steals the movie. I literally... One of the notes I made was, steals this film. Her comedic chops are second to none.
I think her chemistry with Otto as well...
It's brilliant, isn't it?
They play off each other really well. That's the first thing I noticed within a couple of minutes of them being on screen is
they're like a double act.
Those two are having a whale of a time filming this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Obviously, Winona Ryder as well. I often find when you have younger people in films, they're usually the worst part of it. The best compliment I can pay Winona Ryder is that I kind of forgot she's a child. She doesn't. It's not like she's playing it like an annoying kid.
Yeah.
You know, very few films. Obviously, Goonies, Home Alone, E.T. Very few of those types of films have kids who aren't annoying.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think
it's very easy, or at least very common, it would seem, to get the casting way off when they're casting younger actors for exactly those reasons you're saying. Like how many films are almost unwatchable, and it's not the child's fault, it's the casting people and the director's fault usually, because they've just gone in the wrong direction, and it seems to happen a lot. This isn't one of those movies, as you say, the cast is, but I think it's her breakout role. It must be, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's before everything else. I think she's like 16 in this movie, I think I read. So it must be a breakout role. She's perfectly cast. And like you say, it isn't... Sorry, I thought you were going to cough then.
Oh, God, it's not a good sign, is it?
Isn't annoying, isn't overacting either, you know. It's a good performance, it's a solid performance, man.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time the casting is usually done by, you look like the right kind of kid, you look like the thing that we're going for, you know,
rather than their acting chops.
Yeah, whereas here, you know, I'm not saying...
I mean, playing a moody teenager might have been like a busman's holiday, but she still does it very well.
I think we've seen roles where kids are playing essentially themselves and they somehow manage to mess it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Kevin's mum, for me, in this movie, steals this movie. She's so good. I was watching it and I was like, I wrote Gina Davies, brilliant comedic actor. And then Kevin's mum turns up, and I'm like, "Oh, you just lost." And then, like, as the film progressed, I was like, "There isn't a bad comedic performance in this film, from the females, from the males, from the puppets, every comedic turn is done just right." Like you say, is it Otho? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah,
he's hilarious. You know, it's all. There isn't a badly delivered line of dialogue. It all hits the mark perfectly, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really difficult to achieve. I think, you know, we hear about casts where they have, you know, a stellar cast where it's, you know, great actor. But I think just as difficult to produce is a cast of, I'm not going to say relative unknowns, because there are people who are known here, but not necessarily your big name stars, but are able to just create this really good
and in a
feel
movie
and vibe.
And in a movie where you're going to be dead before this podcast is over. In a movie where Michael Keaton is chewing scenery left, right, and centre, all of the other performances hold their weight, and they're not all trying to outact each other. You don't get that who's winning vibe, like, you know what I mean? It's like they're all holding their own in a movie when Michael Keaton's like off the walls Looney Tunes kind of performance is happening, and that says something. Like it's a credit to the director, it's a credit to the actors, it's a credit to the script that you hate. No.
it would have been really easy to have that kind of vibe, and this person's just trying to outdo that person. And
like, could you imagine getting Alec Baldwin now to just a little bit less playback? You're the calm, sensible one. Just let it happen around you.
Just wouldn't happen if you've seen The Departed. It's literally him just trying to keep up with everybody else.
Yeah. Like, could you, like, the fact that even exists on film, Alec Baldwin, I wouldn't say playing second fiddle necessarily, but doing a restrained performance in the middle of what is just such a ludicrous concept and a ludicrous movie is quite fascinating.
And it is totally needed, because you could very easily get lost.
Oh yeah, they have to be the anchor, don't they?
Otherwise it's
Adam and Barbara.
Before you know it, it's too much one way, it's too much this, and you're going, it's too far. So they have to be that, that anchoring point where they're reining everything in and keeping everything grounded. It's
also, it's like central to the plot as well. It's like they're very calm, nice, normal people, and here come this family of lunatics. But they're the dead ones who are like pulling their faces off and doing it. But they're even in the midst of all of that. Like you say, it's very important that they stay grounded and calm, because they're that grounded, calm family unit that Winona Ryder's character needs. And it stuck around her to her parents, her stepmother and her father, who are clearly crazy like types, so good, so all-round good performances, man.
Yeah, which is really, really difficult to achieve, because usually in a cast there's a character or an actor you could kind of do without, you could kind of get rid of, and it wouldn't really make much of a difference. And I think whether or not it was a conscious choice to go, we're not going to try and match Keaton here, let Keaton, wind him up and let him go.
And we're not going to give you too much of him so it becomes annoying. Like, can you imagine Jim Carrey in that role? It's the Jim Carrey show at that, Carey show at that point, isn't it?
I literally put 5 years later, this would be Jim Carrey.
Yeah. My wife said the same thing. That's the Jim Carrey movie. You know what I mean?
I think it would do a good job of it. But
it's a different film.
It's The Mask.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
It's funny because literally I thought 10 years later this is a Jim Carrey film all over it. I think it's one of those things where Michael Keegan.
Michael Keegan.
He's like Michael Keaton. No.
Hey, you did a grand job. Back of the net there, son. What a performance.
I think because Michael Keaton is an actor who does comedy, as opposed to not necessarily a comedian, but a comedic actor, I think that adds just a different kind of level to it, where you've got that kind of eccentricness and that really over-the-top play, but it's not to Jim Carrey's level, where it's like, okay, we're going to let Jim go, he's going to do 10 minutes of stuff and we're going to take 30 seconds of it. I think there's an element of
death is looming large.
I'm going to be having a call with Beetlejuice in a minute.
I'm just marking down. I'm going to have to cut out your swearing.
Many apologies. I swear like a docker.
I dropped an F-bomb earlier and I didn't write it down. I'm like, I'm going to have to go back through this and find that. I corrected it. I dropped it. Went, say that again without the swear word. I've no idea where it was. About half hour ago, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we are still a professional outfit.
Do you think it matters? Like, I mean, do you think about the content of what we're talking about is very adult content at the moment? And we obviously have a policy where we try not to swear too much in here. We try to keep it out completely, just because it's seems like the right thing to do in that respect. But when you're talking about the subject matter we're talking about, and you're like, you just said shit. I mean, can you not? It does seem a little ludicrous.
It's like we've got the censor man in the corner going, you actually can't say that on record.
Yeah. Where were we?
Current job vacancies at Amity Island this month. we are currently recruiting for a new sheriff at Amity Sheriff Station. Candidates will be smart of appearance and have some policing knowledge. Job role will include all things sheriffy, and some shark murder may be necessary. Also hiring at Quint's Bait and Tackle Shop, looking for new captain due to loss of previous candidate due to mega shark munching. Please apply within Quint's Bait and Tackle Shop, south of the pier.
Good evening and welcome to Inside the Actor's Mind, the show that delves deep into the psyche to find out what makes a great character, a great performance, and what makes a great actor. I am Julius Oxbridge Teeth III. Join me as we go deep into the actor's mind. I'm Julius Oxbridge Teeth III. Won't you join me next week as we go deep into the actor's mind?
But yeah, as you say, a really, really good cast. I'm
still laughing.
I'm trying to pull it back here, Jim. I've got no idea what we're talking about, but I'm trying to pull it back.
I reckon there's going to be an edit there, mate.
Yeah.
The whole conversation just go cut. Come back in.
Great acting. But in terms of the cast, we've got our usual alternative casting trivia, as we always seem to pluck out in these things, which is always a really, if nothing else, interesting read. So the first one, which, I mean, I'm going to present it to you in a way where we know that Tim Burton is a bit kooky. He's a bit out there.
He may have established that. Yes.
He's got some ideas which aren't necessarily the norm. But I would like to know what kind of thing he was smoking.
Okay.
Because apparently, pinch of salt needed with this. Mm-hmm. But apparently, because he was a fan of this particular person since childhood.
You're building this up. This better be impressive.
He wanted, in the role of Beetlejuice, Sammy Davis Jr. And the end of the trivia...
Sammy Davis Jr.
finishes with, but studio executives didn't like that idea at all. And I've never thought I'd say this, but... Thank God for studio executives.
They may have a point.
I'm Beetlejuice. I can't see it at all.
There may be a long period of silence while I process this information. Sammy Davis Jr.
For those who are having trouble picturing Sammy Davis Jr., he's one of the Rat Pack of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. Who was the other dude?
It's a sorry, I was Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. Isn't that it? I don't know.
It's four of them. There's another one that we're forgetting.
I don't know.
Anyway, one of the Rat Pack, big band, fantastic performer in his own right. However, not really.
I'm going to say John Wayne. No, I don't know.
However, not really somebody you could picture in a film made by Tim Burton.
It's a very different performance. He would then be, I'm assuming, and I don't want to typecast Sammy Davis Jr., he would have been a smooth character, right? If you're thinking Rat Pack.
The only thing I can think is this was before a proper script was seen and they didn't really know what the character was.
Or before they changed the script.
Yeah, because
I could see if he was like a smoother, your sort of smooth devil kind of demon character where it's more like... I can only see him in a tuxedo. That's all I see him in my mind.
I think it's safe to say...
Could you see Sammy Davis Jr. in a black and white pinstripe... No, it's not pinstripe, is it? Black and white stripy suit, humping the ground. It's like...
Eating beetles.
Yeah, eats a fly. That scene, where the fly lands and his hand comes out of the I was going to call it astroturf, but, the fake grass, and he eats the fly. It is a definite nod to the original Fly, the Fly horror movie, because at the end of that movie, I think we discussed this in the Fly episode, when they find the fly with the man's head on a cobweb about to be eaten by a spider, it's going, help me, help me, help me. It's right.
And some of you say that these podcasts don't have a link. There it is right there, everyone.
But yeah, I saw that and I went, they must have done that on purpose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's safe to say you would have to change an awful lot about this movie to accommodate Sammy Davis Jr. in that role. I don't know if it's just one of these things that somebody just types and it becomes a thing, almost like a water cooler moment where somebody says it and it becomes that's actually what was going to happen.
Or it's a throwaway comment he made in an interview once. Was there anyone else you would have wanted to play him? Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
Do you know, because I don't know much about Tim Burton, but he can be a bit ornery. You know what I mean? He can be a bit grumpus, So I could well see him going, just to be a sardonic D-hole. Sammy Davis Jr. Why? Because I just love him. You know what I mean?
Now it seems more believable.
And then chuckling to himself, they're going to write that down,
Yeah, a very strange one. For the role of Lydia, which is Winona Ryder's character, we had Juliette Lewis, potentially.
Would that be a pre-fame Juliette Lewis as well, I suppose? Yeah. I don't... I think of her as Dusk Till Dawn as probably being one of her earliest roles. The first one I ever saw
True
her in.
Romance.
No, it's not True Romance. Natural Born Killers. That's she was in, wasn't she? So that would have been before Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah,
before.
I want to say 92, 93. That was.
Yeah, it's got to be.
So definitely. So she. In 88, she's around the right age, definitely, It's not like we see now where we've got 30-year-olds playing teenagers. Also, Sarah Jessica Parker, which, again, pre-fame at the time.
Yeah, she turns up in Ed Wood with Burton as well, doesn't she? Yeah.
Again, some substance there then. Brooke Shields.
Again, sort of child actor around that time, yeah.
Molly Ringwald.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, of course. What's Labyrinth? That's 87-ish. It's around the same time, isn't it?
Similar time. Yeah. Again, all those kind of younger...
I could see Jennifer Connelly doing a Winona Ryder, but you only have that as a reference because Winona Ryder did it. So I don't know what her performance would consist of, but I could see her doing that act.
It's not too much of a jump to see her in that role, is it? It's, it's not Sammy Davis Jr. Another role, another actor considered for Beetlejuice, Dudley Moore.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I like Dudley Moore. He's a good comedic actor. It's the problem is with a role like Beetlejuice, it is Beetlejuice. It's like trying to recast Indiana Jones. It's just like always my go-to, try to recast, imagine someone else. It's supposed to be Tom Selleck. And you go, nah. But that's because you've got Harrison Ford in your head. So that was always very visceral, so I always return to it. So when you think of Beetlejuice, you think of Michael Keaton. You could say that Sammy Davis Jr. is so left field, you go, no, it can't be done unless it's completely different. Dudley Moore, again, it's going to be very different. It's going to be very English. It's not going to be... I can't imagine it being as sort of, what's the word, like viscerally gross. Because he's quite a gross character, and his like the actual character's gross. His appearance is gross. Everything that comes out of him is like, even he's got this like fat fake belly suit on, so he just looks like he's like slovenly and slobbish is kind of how he comes across, doesn't he? You know what I mean? Dudley Moore doing that act in a British accent, it doesn't quite mesh, but I could imagine a version that Dudley Moore does that's very different, that would also probably be quite pleasing. It might also have relegated it to that movie once that came out, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's difficult when when the title role is
iconic at this point. Yeah,
it's very, as you say, very difficult to picture anything else or something completely different. I think there's the reason I said Jim Carrey, 10 years later is because there's a real kind of, in Keaton's version, a subtly slapstick physical character there that I think a lot of people would take what was said and do the lines and they would miss that physicality that Keaton brings to it, and therefore it's not the same. Whereas even the bit where it's the little advert on the telly and he's the cowboy, the way he moves is as grotesque and as kind of jarring as the words that's coming out, and his voice is very gravelly. It kind of meshes really well together, and I think a lot of actors would kind of miss that and would go, "Oh, it's just funny lines. Let's do the lines. That's what's funny." Actually,
yeah, they miss that great physical performance. Where like you're saying, if you had Jim Carrey doing it, you go, well, he's going to bring the physicality as well.
Dial it up to 10, and that's what you'll
Jim Carrey
getting.
Essentially would be Michael Keaton, but on Red Bull. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Dudley Moore,
several cans of Red Bull.
It's just not there, is it?
Again, it's a very different.
I can only imagine Dudley Moore as Beetlejuice as being very like, oh, why is me kind of act. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be doing this. You know what I mean? Yeah.
In the role of Barbara, which was obviously played by Gina Davis, again crops up. We obviously was in The Fly, and we spoke about Gina Davis. Here, I think she's cast brilliantly again.
Superb, yeah.
As you were saying, up until Kevin's mum, that's all I can refer to her as.
Yeah, sorry about
unfortunately. Up until she enters the frame, the first thing I thought was Gina Davis has got really great comic timing. That is that is taken for granted. Like there's that scene where they're in bed and then the covers get taken off her and she's actually levitating beside. And there's a really good point where she realises, then she falls, then she screams. And I think a lot of people would realise, scream, and then the fall would happen. Whereas she does it after the fall, or very, very subtly. And it's like, it just makes it that bit funnier. Yeah. And I think...
No, I 100% had exactly the same thought process. I was like, she's such an underrated comic actor. Like, it's criminal. Because it's funny, because we saw her in The Fly, and we were talking about other films. I didn't even think about Beetlejuice when we were talking about her in The Fly. And then I'm watching, I'm like, oh my God, she's a great comic actor. And then Kevin's mum's turns up, and like the comedy doesn't end. It's very subtle. Like say, her timing's great, her delivery's great. Is when you're matching it with Kevin's mum. It's a very different performance. But yeah, I had exactly the same thought process. She's a great comic actor.
And interestingly, obviously, there's some other names that were brought to the fray. So Kirstie Alley, who I can't picture, but apparently she was in Cheers.
Yeah. And a Star Trek film once.
I can't picture her. But,
okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything you would have seen her in, but that is what she's famous for. Yeah.
Makes sense. Sigourney Weaver, which...
Wow.
Hang
on, 88?
88, so it's
when
just kind of...
Aliens come out?
79.
The first one's 79, isn't it? The second one is 86.
82 is... No,
The second one's 82.
Aliens. Aliens is 86, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was 86. Not known for her because she's done comedy work, Sigourney Weaver.
Obviously, Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters is what, 80, about the same, 87?
Around that sort of time.
87, 86. It might be earlier.
I think she'd be great in this.
She does. She can do comedy.
I think
really
the problem being is that by this point, you're not seeing Sigourney Weaver.
Seeing Ripley.
You're seeing Ellen Ripley, and that's the problem sometimes. Where if this had come 3, 4, even probably a year or two after Alien, where we're still getting used to her being in the public guise, and she's played a good character, but that's not defined her just yet. It could have worked, but I think at this time the horse is probably bolted, and you'd be watching Ellen Ripley.
You can only sort of view these things through your own perspective, can't you? So she was in Ghostbusters before she was in Aliens for me, and I'm not sure I ever really compared the two or put the two together. Do you know what I mean? It's she's that lady from Ghostbusters, and then when I was old enough to watch Aliens, which is I saw Aliens before I saw Alien, I was like, oh, this film's amazing. But I wasn't then going, no, that's that lady from Ghostbusters. If it had been the other way round, I think it might have been jarring. Like you say, if she'd turned up in Beetlejuice playing a sort of very sort of Harold and Hilda housewife kind of kooky, but, very straight-laced, I think maybe I would have been going like, that's weird. But she has really good comedic chops. She can definitely pull it off.
Yeah, I just think sometimes you're playing against what people are known for.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can use
Sometimes that works, doesn't it?
You can use it to your advantage and go, much like I think a couple of the characters were saying, we're expecting one thing and then it's something else. No.
The one that always sticks away is they're like, is it Road to Perdition? And they're like, oh, Tom Hanks is playing against type in this. I'm like, is he? I'm getting some Tom Hanks vibes off of this character, He's ultimately still playing a nice guy, It's just...
Everything around him is a bit more depressing.
Yeah, he's a nice guy with a bad job who's done bad things, but he's still deep down a nice guy.
Yeah, it's very difficult to imagine Tom Hanks as anything other than at the heart of it, a nice guy.
It's nice.
Another name that was bounced around... and for me, this is just, again, probably just because she was a name in Linda Hamilton.
Okay, yeah. I mean, no.
I mean, obviously, for the vast majority of people, she's Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
I've got a soft spot for the film Dante's Peak.
Pierce Brosnan's.
And Pierce Brosnan's. It's got that Pierce Brosnan's in that.
He's got some of them Pierce Brosnan's. Dirty bugger.
I've got a soft spot for it, but it's very difficult to imagine Linda Hamilton as anything other than
Yeah.
And again, you use it. You've got that same problem.
She's in an episode of Frasier, which is probably early noughties. She's only in it briefly. Playing...
She's on about her son who's like,
Yeah. Sorry, it took me a second and I was like, what? She's not in it for long. She's maybe 5 minutes of the episode. And she's not like playing it for laughs, she's playing it straight. She's pretty funny in it though. It's sort of that deadpan delivery sort of thing. Almost a bewildered sort of not bewildered character, but bewildered by the situation.
Oh, okay.
I actually think it would work. It would work if it was 20 years later anyway, or 15 years later. I'm going to say, yeah, I think it would work. If you could get Sarah Connor, out of it. That was terrible.
Gonna say, don't know who that was.
Sarah Connor.
John Malkovich is a Terminator, is it?
Peking. Beetlejuice. Pay him, play Beetlejuice all the money. Nanny. If you could get Sarah Connor out of your mind, maybe. I think, again, very iconic roles very hard to move past sometimes, aren't they? Yeah.
I think it's just difficult because I don't think I've not seen Linda Hamilton in anything other than those two films that I mentioned, Terminator and
Terminator 2.
Terminator. She's in Terminator 2 and
Dark
and Dante's Peak.
Dark Horizons. Is that the Terminator film she turns up in again?
Dark Fate.
Dark Fate. That's
yeah.
I'm not sure I've seen Dante's Peaks.
Yeah, I mean, they're not missing
Pierce
much.
Brosnan's.
It's like a Sunday afternoon version of Volcano.
Right, yeah.
But
all right, well, yeah. I'm going to say yeah.
It's difficult. Another name I can see working for. This is for Delia now, which is Kevin's mum, Angelica Houston.
Morticia herself.
Yeah.
She would definitely be able to. Hang on, when was it? Adam's Family's? I want to say like 1990.
Yeah, early 90s. Yeah.
So you wouldn't be thinking of Morticia when you saw her. So yeah, okay, all right, yeah, let's go with it.
I think that could work. Again, another name for the role of Lydia, Heather Langenkamp.
Of course,
from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Who did she play in Nightmare on Elm Street?
The main girl in Nightmare on Elm Street.
I forget her name now. I'm going to say Kirsty. It's Kirsty. Her name's Kirsty.
Doesn't sound like a horror film name.
Kirsty's definitely the name of the girl in Hellraiser.
Fair enough.
I think
she plays the main girl in Nightmare on Elm Street.
What is her name? It doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah.
Again, right sort of age. I think that kind of works. Another casting for Adam's character, Bill Pullman.
Yep.
That works.
Yeah.
I kind of see Bill Pullman as that kind of character anyway.
Everyone's dad.
Yeah, he's kind of a nice guy, just a nice guy. I've got some other names now. These are all considered to play I keep saying Beetlejuice because that's how it's written.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to throw some names out.
Right.
I want a quick yes or no, maybe a little bit of explanation.
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman.
No.
I always think of that Laurence Olivier quote.
Yeah.
Try acting, it's much easier.
I think he'd be like sleeping in cemeteries for about a week before the movie was made. Like, I'm just getting into character. I've been living off eating flies and bugs and things. Hang on. I'm trying to think of comedies he did. Meet the Fockers. He's funny in that, but he's not Beetlejuice funny. He's so new.
Robin Williams.
Oh, there's nothing Robin Williams can't do.
I mean, it's you know, I mean, I'm just going to say it's not that there's ever a good person to lose in Hollywood, but we lost Robin Williams far too soon. Just such a
100%, yeah.
And not only for his comedic work, but just for his serious work as well. Really underrated.
A superb actor, and like as I said, there's nothing he couldn't do. 100% actually. That's still a great movie. Robin Williams as Beetlejuice is still a good movie.
I see it being more family friendly as a movie. I see Robin Williams. I almost see Robin Williams doing a version-ish of like The Genie, where Beetlejuice ends up going into other characters.
I think that is where his movie career sort of ended up. I think his stand-up stuff is more adult leaning. It's not like adult, but it's more adult leaning. So
it's not Chris Rock.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. It's still a great movie. Yeah, definitely different, but still great.
Christopher Lloyd.
Actually, in a weird way, I could go with that. I mean
he's got half the look already, isn't he?
You've seen him lately. He kind of does look a little bit like Beetlejuice now. I love Christopher Lloyd. Obviously, he's Doc Brown to me, or Jim from Taxi. But he's always Doc Brown. It's different. I mean, he does basically stoned a lot. That's his sort of character vibe. Is stoned. He's in Clockwork Orange as well, isn't he? I'm sure he's one of the people in the I know Danny DeVito's in there. Yeah, Christopher Lloyd's in there. A young Christopher Lloyd. I'm sure he is. I love that movie.
Been a while since
I have
I've
a
seen
poster of it on my
Clockwork
wall. I should be able to remember this. Yeah, 100% Christopher Lloyd's. It's not a big part. Yeah, 100%. I can picture him in it now. It's, again, I don't know, it's a very different movie, seems to be all I'm saying. It would work in a different way. Okay. I don't think I'd be angry by it anyway.
Obviously, we've touched upon Jim Carrey, which, again, 10 years later, it's his film. It
Without
would be,
doubt. If they remade it tomorrow, he would still be in discussions for it. You know what I mean?
It's just a role that lends itself quite easily to that kind of performance. Tim Curry, I can see that, but it being very dark.
All I see is the clown from It when you say it.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually think that would still work.
I think it would work, but I think it would be a much darker version of that character. I think it would lean into that kind of disgusting element of the character. I think Jack Nicholson.
I don't know, because sorry. Hang on.
Let's stay on Tim Curry for a moment. Ignore what I've just said.
I was just thinking about, like, the clown in It, as frightening as that is, the comedy stuff in that, it's very Beetlejuice. Like, have you seen the TV version with Tim Curry, right? I saw it a few years ago again, because I remember when it came out. It was before the movie's been remade, which is probably longer ago than I think it is now. But anyway,
89, I think it's. Time.
I thought it was early 90s. Doesn't matter. It's not important. I watched it a few years back. And the funny stuff, his funny bits in it had me, like, I was quoting them for weeks afterwards, you know, kiss me, fat boy, and all that sort of stuff, and all that, like, the funny clown stuff he's doing. It's very Beetlejuice-esque, actually. I wonder which one came first now.
I always remember the story where he was cast in the role of the Joker, and I think the animated series
did the first.
Yeah,
the first episode.
Apparently they said it's too scary. We're going to go in a different direction.
I have the animated series on DVD, at least series 1. I don't think I have the complete one. Anyway, I haven't noticed that much difference between his performance and Mark Hamill's. And Mark Hamill himself said, I couldn't see anything wrong with his performance. It was pretty similar to what I did. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I'd watch that movie.
Now, I want you to act surprised when I say this next name.
You're not going to say something stupid like Jack Nicholson, are you?
Jack Nicholson.
I mean, we've seen him as the Joker a year later.
It's very similar, isn't it?
Michael Keaton for Tim Burton and all that. Yeah.
Let me guide you into the underworld.
No, hang on. So I don't know. Right. I'm trying to get Jack Nicholson's Joker in my mind. Go with a smile. Right, that's him, isn't it? Where does he get those toys? Those wonderful, wonderful toys. I mean, he can... Yeah, but... yeah, I'm going to say yeah. I'm going for yeah. I can't expand on it any more than he played the Joker and he was good at doing that. So, yeah, I'm gonna say yeah. Not top of my list, but yeah.
Bill Murray?
No, actually. I don't think he could do it.
The only way I could see him do it is if Beetlejuice didn't want to be there. It's just there, just like totally just like, have I really got to do this?
Oh,
but again, you're changing it so
now
much.
You've said that, I can picture him doing it.
Yeah,
I can't, now you say that, I can.
I think wasn't it you who told me the story of Bill Murray would just go around to people's houses
doing their washing up,
do the washing up, like
yeah, he's weird.
Yeah, I mean,
turns up at people's parties and then does the washing up. It was the one I always think about is someone said they were walking through Central Park and he walked up behind them, put his hands over their eyes or something. They turned around and he went, "No one's ever going to believe you." Just walked off. When I say it sounds sinister. It was more jovial, I believe. Like, no one's going to believe you that you
I don't care who it is. Anybody doing that to me is quite sinister. Nobody's going to believe you. What kind of psychopath does that?
I think it may have been my delivery. No one's going to. Yeah, it may be right. It sounds creepy now you mention it.
I tell you what, if I'm walking home tonight and somebody puts their hands over my eyes and says, nobody's going to believe you.
Yeah, now you mention it, that dude's got issues.
Yeah.
Hang on, Beetlejuice. He's such a different character. Okay.
Last two.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's in that. Robert De Niro.
No. I mean, he's got some comedic chops. He
does.
Old Robbie D.
I feel like with these, it's literally just where
it was
somebody's
on a list.
gone. Who's made some money? What about De Niro? No, that's as much as it got. This one, I mean, I kind of want to see it.
Look what you made me do.
John Cleese.
Another British name.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he's got physicality with his funny walks. He could do funny walking. Have I ever seen John Cleese like really swinging for the fences in a movie? Fish Called Wanda's great. He plays button down characters. He plays I'm about to explode with pent up English rage really well.
Is that with Kevin Kline as well and Jamie Lee?
Yeah.
Long time since I've seen that, but I remember it being really good.
Probably going to leave that one in. It's of its time. It's 80. It's a couple of years after Trading Places, so I'm going to say 88 as well. It's probably the same year as this. I watched it really recently, like a few months ago. The pacing is what an 80s comedy, British comedy would be. It's still really funny. Also has some slightly problematic stuff in it. You can't avoid it.
I think just in general,
things have moved on.
Films
like
from that era.
There's like Kevin Kline spends a lot of the film taking the mick out of Michael Palin's stutter. So it's stuff like that. But the film as a whole it still holds up. There's some great comedy moments in it. Kevin Kline is swinging for the fences in that movie. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen John Cleese go for it.
All I can see is just him being Basil Fawlty.
Basil Fawlty.
It's like, yes.
Yeah.
I
mean, he does get it's that pent up, I'm going to explode, and then he explodes.
Help? You want my help?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Okay, well, in the role of...
I saw this thing online the other day, and it was a rejection letter he got for 40 Towers. From someone. He posted it online all these years later, and it was like, this isn't funny. It was really scathing. Like, what is this? This is terrible. And he's like, heads of comedy. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah.
It makes you wonder, all the things that weren't...
The things you could have seen, yeah.
And then some of the things that were commissioned, and you go,
the terrible
comedy,
things I have seen. Yeah.
So in the role of Otho, John Candy, I mean...
Well, yeah, John Candy in anything's great. You know what I mean?
John Goodman in anything's great.
There's nothing he can't do either. Yeah.
Again, it's the name that always appears on these lists. Bob Hoskins, once again. I swear.
At least it wasn't Mel Gibson this time.
I just got an image of like Bob Hoskins' agent going to every meeting about every film.
He's available.
I could get Bob for you.
I've got Bob Hoskins. Yeah. Mallywood.
Again. Actually, I can't see Bob Hoskins in the slightest.
No. I mean, I'm trying not to say the same thing I always say when he comes up, which is he doing his Mario voice? No, bless him.
And a familiar name from the Jurassic Park episode, Wayne Knight.
Oh, right, on Newman. Yeah. Newman.
Again,
he could do it.
That fits.
88, Seinfeld was on telly then, I think. 88, 89, yeah. So, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He's good. He's great in Jurassic Park as well, isn't he? So
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think, as I say, because we spoke about those characters, they're malleable to a point where you can change those. I think Beetlejuice is much more... kind of not fixed, but it's a lot more difficult to change that without changing everything.
Yeah, you couldn't call Otho an iconic character.
No,
you know
no,
what I mean, or any of the others really. Cool.
And I think interestingly, on the casting, one of the reasons why if you change Michael Keaton, it changes so much is because apparently he ad-libbed about 90% of his lines.
Is that right?
So, I mean...
Oh, it is a completely different movie then.
Yeah, it's... And actually, when you think about if he ad-libbed 90% of that, if that's accurate, some of the lines he comes out with, particularly the line where he says, "What are your qualifications?" I can't remember the whole speech.
Yeah.
But it's it's brilliant.
Had a whale at a time at the Black Death or something like that, isn't it? Yeah,
I've seen The Exorcist 163 times and it's
getting funnier. Yeah. That is such a good line. Yeah. That really stands out, that.
Yeah.
And
I think
it keeps getting funnier.
And I think what's really good about Keaton's performance is that it's funny, but there's an element of like, this guy's a bit scary as well.
He is scary. That's
that's kind of the whole point is that, he's funny, but he's a little bit unhinged and a little bit, I'll say that word again, kooky. So I think putting anybody else in that role obviously changes it completely. And if you're ad-libbing, going to change.
So all the dialogue changes, doesn't it? That's it. It's a very different movie.
So let's have a look at some more general kind of trivia. So, here's one that's quite interesting. So, obviously, how these films start. I think until you start looking into them, I think when you think of somebody who's directed a film, like for years, I would always associate that with being their film. So because they've directed it, it's theirs. They've done everything on it. It's all their thing.
That's right.
So when you hear about, this was actually a script that was written and then was bounced around studio to studio. And
was it bouncing around for a long time, was it? Yeah.
I don't know if it was in this instance, but one of the names, again, somebody who's cropped up before, Wes Craven, on to direct, which again...
If it's the original... darker script would make sense because it was originally written as much more of a sort of standard horror movie than a sort of fairy tale fun family movie, wasn't it?
I think I think Tim Burton brings with it all of those things that we've actually said is quite positive about the film,
and all those visual gags that he brings in, like at the end when Beetlejuice is trying to marry Lydia and he's looking for the ring and it's someone's finger. He's pulling the ring off the finger. It's just a little throwaway thing that makes you laugh. Or like when their caseworker is talking to him and she takes a drag on a cigarette and then the smoke comes out of her neck instead of out of her mouth.
Really sort of blink and you miss it type thing.
Really, it's there. But if you're looking at her face and you just sort of notice this smoke coming up out of her neck, little stuff like that. And again, like we say, all those little one-liners that are in there that just keep the film bouncing along nicely. It's different. All that. Obviously, it's not written by Burton, but he took it to one script doctor, then took it to another. A little bit more. I want more of this, or a little bit more of this. Get it to where I want it. I want it to feel, because he makes those family kind of movies. So he would have got all of those jokes added in, or those little one-liners, all those nice little bits, and then those visual gags. I wonder how much was him and how much was the script. Nice little stuff. Wes Craven's version, it's going to be that darker first version, isn't it?
With a little bit of humour dropped in every now and again, but definitely more of an afterthought.
But I suspect half of the characters would have died by the end of it. At least her parents. I suspect her parents would have died, and she would have gone to live with Adam and Barbara as the surrogate parents at the end in a Wes Craven comedy.
It's almost an oxymoron, that, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, interestingly, the effects budget on this was, it says just $1 million, as if
just $1 million,
which I appreciate in Hollywood. That is probably
extremely low.
Extremely low, but
it's funny though, because
in a cost of living crisis, the word "just" is really offensive.
Well, this is the thing we come up with. This comes up every now and then. We're talking. Oh, they made it for just
Yeah.
30 million quid, 50 million quid. And it made a reasonable return at the box office. And it's like so much money, you can't even really think about it, you know. But it's, we've made it this far without actually mentioning the special effects. And it's always very dangerous because we say the same thing about the special effects all the time. This does have my favourite and your favourite, which is practical effects, because it's from 1988.
I think we need like a little jingle every time we say it.
We're going to say it.
Practical effects! We need something like that.
It's not bad.
Interestingly, something that Tim Burton said was because of the how low the budget was.
His measly $1 million. Yeah.
He wanted to make it look as tacky and B-movie as possible.
Oh, right on, because it works. Yeah,
because there's certainly some points where it's like, you know, where they're distorting their faces to try and scare the family.
Yeah,
it's like, that's really, really, like, if
plasticine-y. Yeah.
And it works because it keeps that level of lightness to it. If it had have had
it'd been a serious movie at that
a much more authentic looking, that would immediately make it 10 times darker.
Yeah, could you imagine if it was a serious movie and then they pulled out those special effects? You'd be like, it's not funny, but because it's a comedy, it works. It would ruin the movie. And like you're saying, the other way round.
Who would be horrifically scarred.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It has lots of plasticine type special effects, or claymation, I should say, special effects in it. And it's that, like we always say, it's that tactile, like, feel to it. And like you say, like, apparently he purposely made it look kind of ropey or B-movie-esque, and it works so well. Speaks to me. That's how movies looked when I grew up anyway, and I love it. And all these years later, which is always the same point we always come back to make, is it dates but in a different way, whereas CGI dates and just looks bad. This dates and it's still, you still go, that still looks, especially in a comedy, it still works and it still looks amazing. Okay, you can see that that's a painting on the ball that they're walking towards, or that's clearly, they're clearly dubbed onto a pre-animated scene, and that's clearly plasticine and clay. And it doesn't matter in the context of this movie, but it's still, I guess, in the context of a fun film, it doesn't matter. It's a weird, otherworldly film. The special effects look weird and otherworldly. It just makes sense, you know.
It adds to the level of charm to it.
100%.
You know, you're looking at it and you're going, you know, you're looking at it with a more of like an artistic kind of view of like, this isn't,
how did they do it?
This isn't meant to look realistic or 100% real. This is, you know.
Yeah. And it's like, so there's that scene, like you say, when they distort their faces and they go back in, and Lydia's talking to Beetlejuice in the I was going to say map, in the model, the
miniature,
in the miniature,
miniature model,
and they run in, and he's trying to put his face back together, and she. Again, Gina Davis' great comic timing. She's talking to Lydia and looking over her shoulder, just shooting little like exasperated looks, but they're not over the top. It's subtle. It's great comedic acting. And then there's that bit where he hasn't quite put his face in. You know it's coming. It's like real low rent special effects where you see the back of his head, and then he turns around and he's got a big long nose and he just pushes it back in. Absolutely. I mean, I suspect the special effects budget on that was zero almost, you know what I mean? And you know it's coming, but again, like you say, there's the charm. You know that joke's coming. They don't overlabor it. If you did that now, it would be a whole thing, and it wouldn't add anything to it, you know? Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I like is when they're digging up Beetlejuice. Obviously, it's in the miniature, so the stuff that's used is like stuff just like household
polystyrene and cardboard. Like polystyrene.
But I like the fact that when they're digging it up, that's like the, as opposed to a bundle of dirt, it's a bundle of old chipboard,
it's a real nice touch,
old carpet and stuff like that. It's a really, I think it's a great touch to it because they've lent into that kind of. We haven't got a lot of money yet. Let's rather than hide it, let's lean into it and say, oh no, it's supposed to be like this. This is the gag. The gag is it doesn't look right.
Yeah. You're expecting this to be dirt. It wouldn't be dirt, and it's not going to be.
Like when he first puts the shovel in, I'm kind of, are they going to cut away? It's going to be dirt, and then actually, oh no, they're just going to carry on shooting it. It's just going to the whole bit of that turf comes up. It's brilliant. You know,
it all looks a bit Lego-y, doesn't it? That's right. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep banging on about special effects so much because we do always seem to return to the same point. But it's visually for £1 million. It's money well spent because it became iconic.
Absolutely. So moving on to favourite scenes. So what would you say is your favourite scene in the film?
It's the dance scenes. Specifically the one around the table when Harry Belafonte kicks in.
It's so standout.
It's so satisfying. I don't want that song to end. The music choice is amazing. Like Adam's love of Harry Belafonte, he's listening to it at the beginning of the film, he puts it in that bit and it's at the end. Such great choice in music. It's so good that I don't want that song to end when it comes on. I'm like, just do the whole thing. Just do the whole sequence from a man who hates musicals. Do you know what I mean? And I know it's not a musical. It's very different. But it's like the best tasting cake when I watch it. It's so satisfying. You know
I think what makes it as well is you could do that and it could just be, this is a little dance number and a little
overdo it as well.
It's the look again, pretty much on Delia's face as she's totally
acting,
out of control of her own extremities, and that's when we said earlier about comedic acting and why she's so good. That scene is where you can so tell that they're having so much fun because that kind of energy and that kind of funness just kind of bleeds through the camera, and that's often really difficult to kind of capture. Like,
how many takes do you think that took?
You can film something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the vibe and the feeling that's in the room is going to translate.
You've got angles to do. You've got like different takes. You've got you're slightly off there. We've got to go again. I mean. And you trying to record an intro to a podcast takes long enough, you know what I mean?
And then you got the thing of like, whoever's editing that has then got to edit that and not lose any of that. So it's real skill involved that I think a lot of people would look at and wouldn't necessarily go, that's
hard to pull off.
That's a masterpiece of filmmaking. There, I don't think anybody would really look at that and go, they look at things that are much easier to make that jump. But I think here I'm not going to say it's a masterpiece of filmmaking, but it's certainly one of the subtleties of filmmaking that a lot of people take for granted.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the better things Burton's put on to film. Not that his stuff's rubbish or anything, but that is so iconic. Specifically when they return to it at the end, when she's like, "I did well in my exams." Like, "Oh, go on then," and they put it. That lives in my head, that scene, as it does, I think, a lot of people, because it's so like, it's something, it's got that thing that you can't quite put your finger on where it just works. Why is that funny, or why is that so well? Why does that stand out so much? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. If I wrote that down on a bit of paper, they get possessed and they all go around a table and sing a song, or sing a Harry Belafonte, whatever it is, What's the song? It'll be a slightly funny song, so it will look absurd. Oh yeah, I can mentally go, I think I can visualize that. That sounds funny. And then when you actually see it on the screen, it's just got that thing that it's so satisfying to watch. And that's my favourite scene in a movie that has visually so much to take in and so much that's good. Like the stuff with Beetlejuice in the miniature is all of that's great.
My wife is often a barometer of how interesting something is, not necessarily how good something is, because I do query her movie choices on a regular basis. But she wasn't fussed with this film at all, really. She used the phrase, which still hurts now, was, "It's very 80s, isn't it?" And I was like, yeah. And she's like, "I just don't think I like the 80s." To which there was a definite point where I was like, who are you? Anyway, but this dinner party scene, it's almost that thing of like, it's like a kid putting down whatever toy they're playing with and they're just watching because they're just mesmerised by it. And that's kind of how she was. Like, she was on her phone and then this started, and then for the whole scene she's watching it, laughing and thinking, this is pretty fun. And I think that's really, really difficult to do when somebody's already disengaged with
already checked out of the movie.
So I think again that's a good testament to that scene, which again I think a lot of people would kind of take for granted and would kind of think, how hard can it be? But actually when you try and put all the parameters in place and get that,
Yeah, having
incredibly
seen that
difficult.
scene and you're like, that's good, I'm going to replicate that. It's not going to work.
Well,
Even if Tim Burton said, I'm going to redo that scene in a different movie, so it's not going to work.
As we said, you know,
lightning in a bottle.
This has been made into a musical, and so I haven't seen it, but for those who have, I could imagine this is quite an integral part of that musical because it lends itself
keep
quite
coming
well.
up throughout the musical, isn't it? Yeah.
However, I think part of the problem that the musical may face is replicating that kind of
the charm of it,
and the spontaneousness of it, because it does just kind of come out of nowhere.
You're not expecting it, are you?
Whereas in a musical, you're kind of expecting at any time
someone's going to break into song,
and break into a dance piece.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it might be slightly problematic if in a musical they broke into it and had the white characters actually singing that song. It might be very different. I could be wrong. I could be overthinking it. I haven't seen the musical. I'm sure it's not racist in any way. I'm going to have to cut this bit out now.
I think we will.
Before we get sued by the people that make Beetlejuice. Low Rent Podcast gets sued by makers of Beetlejuice for calling it racist. We're definitely cutting. I'm just going to write this down. 141.
I think as well, one of the really, again, blink and you'll miss it. Not necessarily scene, but line. So when Beetlejuice crashes the car and then ends up going to the, let's say, gentleman's club, and the line from Gina Davis to Adam is, "Why did you build that?"
Did you build that?
It's just brilliant. It's like,
I didn't.
so out of nowhere, straight away, it's like the assumption. Why did you build that?
Yeah.
I didn't build that.
I don't think I was going to write that down. I don't think I did. But yeah, it's proper stood out to me.
Especially
That's
considering all of the
line.
crazy things that's happening. The default reaction. Why did you build that? It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Well, I think that, as I say, one of the things that comes out of this a lot more, and kind of moving on to the kind of impact of it, is that this is one of those kind of things where the world, as I said earlier, the world it creates is more interesting than the film itself. So it does lend itself to, as you say, there was a cartoon of it.
New interpretation.
There's now a musical of it. There's going to be a sequel, apparently, which we will gloss over so that some people don't go into a fit of rage.
Yeah. No, I think we can discuss it.
I don't know.
Great deal of information out there about that. This is the problem. This is the problem with IP, right? You know, studios want to make money. I mean, we talk about this a lot as well, don't we? The main motivation is always money, rather than artistic endeavours. If the two collide and work, it's a beautiful thing, you know. A sequel to this has been talked about since the film came out, so nearly whatever that is, 30 odd years, you know, 40 odd years, 35, and it's never seemed like a good idea. And now they're like, we're finally going to do a sequel to that film. Remember that sequel you don't really want? We're going to do it. It's going to have, is it Jenna Ortega? Wednesday Addams is in it.
Yeah, that
I'm
makes a bit of
assuming
sense.
playing the Lydia-esque character if it's
yeah.
a sequel rather than a remake. And it's going to have the problem, all those problems we're talking about with the CGI, it's probably going to have those. I'm assuming Keaton's coming back. I think he'd do well to swerve it, but I mean, I'm not. It's up to him, innit? I mean, I don't.
Is it? Are you not making his booking decisions
yeah, but I wouldn't
now?
judge him for doing it. If
Yeah.
he wanted, I'd want to return to that character if I was him.
He has said it's his favourite film of his, so
He might do well to leave it alone.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's the law of diminishing returns.
Always.
I think part of the problem it will have is obviously if you do a sequel or a remake, automatically you're going to be comparing yourself to that.
the original.
Whereas
and the 30 to 40 years of love that people have built up for that film.
You know, the longer it goes, the more nostalgia builds and the harder it is to capitalise on that expectation. But in terms of, as you say, in the IP, I think there's so much you could do with the IP that you don't need to do
a direct sequel.
You could, I would happily watch a film that explores in the Beetlejuice world.
Yeah,
you know, like let's have a film based around like a character who works in that office when you die and gives out the tickets. Let's see that. I'd go and watch that.
Expand the world.
Doesn't need to have Beetlejuice the character. It can have.
But it's interesting because obviously, you know, when the Dread movie came out and all of the fans wanted a sequel, and they're like, it didn't make enough money. We're not going to do it. And then is it Rebellion, who owns 2000 AD now, said, well, we might do a TV series. And everyone's like, is Carl Urban going to come back? He's like, if you give me enough to do, I'll come back and do it. And they were like, I don't know what's happened to it. It was happening. It was in pre-production, COVID. I don't know what's going on. I haven't looked into it recently. I think where they were heading with it was, well, what we might do, rather than doing a Dread TV series, is do a TV series around the world of Dread, because the world of Dread in 2000 AD, Mega City 4, is vast, and it's been fleshed out since the 70s. And a TV series set in that world would be amazing if it was done right. And I read something, they were saying that may be what the stumbling block with Carl Urban coming back is. He wants more to do, possibly, is what thing I read online. But I haven't heard much about it. And so it's that same thing you're talking about where I'm like, yeah, expand the world. You don't need to do a direct sequel. Remakes, reboots, all that. I mean, it's rife. It's all that's happening these days. It's IP they already own. They don't have to pay for it. It's got a fan base built in. People are going to watch it. I mean, you often talk about this. Deep down, we know it's going to be bad. We're still going to go watch it. If another Terminator movie came out, it's like, we're both going to go watch it. And we're going to go hold our noses and watch it and just pray it's not terrible, you know? Or, I mean, they're not all of the Terminator sequels aren't terrible. They're just, they're all right.
They're not Terminator 2.
Yeah, they're all right. Yeah. You know, it's that diminishing returns. It's not a bad movie. It's okay. Arnie's looking old. You know, and I did make a list. I'm not going to read it all out, but I curiously was thinking about the Beetlejuice remake, and I started thinking about all the remakes that are potentially in the works. So I made a quick list. I'll have a quick look through. We'll go through a couple of them because time is ticking on, isn't it? The Lost Boys, they want to remake. Meh. I think you might as well just. It will be. I personally think you're probably looking at. What's the sparkly vampire movie that everyone loves? Twilight. It's gonna veer that way. I don't think it needs to be done.
I don't think there's enough there for it to be remade. It's not like
it did what it needed to do.
It is an iconic vampire film, but it's not like this is where this trope starts. This is. I wouldn't say. Because I watched Lost Boys recently.
It's a great movie, isn't it?
It's great, but
I'm sure we'll get round to it on air one day.
What would be the point of remaking it?
Well, this is
money.
Is quite often what we talk about. What is your artistic endeavour? Yeah, because apart from money, yeah.
You might be able to create the same feel, but if you're going to remake it, then we've already got that film. We just watch that one as opposed to a remake. A sequel or a it's set in the same world, fleshing out some of the characters and doing something different. Yeah, but
But the thing is, it's not going to happen, isn't it? So we've got Drop Dead Fred. Russell Brand was tied to that at one point. I think he's now dropped out. American. I've written an American Werewolf in London.
That's a movie I'd say.
Golfing Werewolves, Escape from New York, Commando, Highlander, Little Shop of Horrors, which itself was a remake. Weird Science. Some of these may have come out since I wrote this list down. The Crow. Did they remake The Crow?
There's been a lot of sequels.
Dirty Dancing, Time Bandits, American Psycho, Scarface. Gremlins 3 is apparently in the works. And obviously they just made Evil Dead, The Evil Dead. I went to watch it. It's not a good movie. Visually, like candy. It's so nice to look at. It's storyline I couldn't give 2 cares about. Do you know what I mean? And this is so often the case, isn't it? Like, when the problem is when they say, so you hear the news, Beetlejuice is getting a reboot or a sequel now in this day and age. All you can do is think about all of those films they've already tried that with and how none of them seem to work. You know?
Yeah. where I kind of sit on the remakes, I don't mind a remake. I think there are some films that sometimes do need to remake to appeal to a different audience. So, for example, I think, there are films from the 50s and 60s that I'd love to see remade, because I think the way in which films were made in the 50s and 60s, if you don't like that type of filmmaking, you're not gonna enjoy the film.
Oh, the pacing is so different. Yeah.
It's a completely different film.
Like, I love Get Carter. I think that's 70s, to be fair. But say the Harry Palmer movies with Michael Caine, those spy thrillers. I love them. They're such good movies, but they're slow, and you have to, when you watch it, before you sit down to watch it, you go, I'm going to have to accept the film I'm watching is going to have a slower pace. It's going to be more, I guess there was that sort of, we're aiming for gritty realism thing, so they did that. He's making eggs. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. You've never seen James Bond fry an egg before, which is interesting as a concept, but 80 years later or whatever it is when you're watching it, you go, okay, it's a slower film. But I watch that in that appreciation. So I say, if you don't like the way films are made in that era, you're not going to appreciate it. So it's long enough ago, films are made so differently, it could lend itself to a remake.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult.
But how do you replace Michael Caine? Can't be done.
I mean,
do you replace him with Jack Nicholson? And who is the other people that always come up? Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, that's it. Damn it, I couldn't get the name. Yeah. Do you replace him with Bob Hoskins?
Yeah. The one thing so for example, one film that I love, but it's I think it's a really bad movie, but I really like it. It's a film called Phantasm.
It's from the 80s, right?
Late 70s, I think. 70s.
Is that the one with the ball?
Yeah,
and the spiky thing that comes out? I saw it once when I was a kid. Yeah,
it's a pretty bad movie.
I think it's well known as being bad, but we love it.
Cult
so bad
horror.
it's good.
So I've got the collection. There's like 5 of them.
That's right.
They're all terrible. I so badly want to see it remade, because you could do so much with it. And I think part of the problem with remakes is they always, and it makes sense because you're trying to make money, but they always remake things that people love. And I think
rather than things that should be remade.
If you remake something with the purpose of, when we release this, it wasn't very good. For example, let's take Dread. Obviously, you had Stallone's version. I'm about to
get angry. No.
But you had Stallone's version, so remaking Dread.
I actually have a soft spot for that as well, even though it is a terrible movie. Yeah. But I was a kid when that came out. So remaking that,
the reason why I think it's not only is the Carl Urban version a good film, but it also means that you're not trying to fight with an expectation of, is it going to be as good as this film, because the expectation is already pretty low. So I think remakes. That's
a really good point.
It's never going to happen. Don't get me wrong, because I have no sway in Hollywood.
They might listen to this. You never know.
If they are, remake films that you had a missed opportunity on, that were almost good,
just short of the mark,
or films that
didn't quite catch on, maybe.
That are kind of more cult films where there's a lot to explore and there's not high expectation of, if you're going to go back and you're going to we're going to remake One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Everybody loves that film. Don't touch it, because you're never going to get to that level. But if you remake a film that virtually perhaps hardly any people have heard of.
You remake Manhunter into Silence of the Lambs or Red Dragon. It's just its actual direct sort of remake, isn't it? You go, oh, this is good. And then you go back and watch the thing they remade it from. You go, not so much.
Yeah.
That works, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. As I say, watched Manhunter for the first time the other day. And I was like...
You text me afterwards.
I was surprised at how close it was to Red Dragon.
Yeah, crazy, right? And the main dude, you're like, he looks familiar. And then how did you know who it was going in?
That's Gil Grissom from CSI.
Yeah. Did you know it going in?
Oh yeah, I knew that going in.
I didn't put the two together for about because I'd seen Manhunter before. I'd seen CSI, and then I saw Manhunter. I didn't even watch the whole thing. I saw it briefly again on TV. I was watching a bit of it. I said, that dude looks familiar.
But as I say, with that
skinny and young.
And whilst Red Dragon isn't a remake of that, it's the same story based on the books. It's not a traditional remake. It works because Manhunter's an all right film, but it's never going to be a film people go, It's so good. Have you seen this film? It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, but if you think, so you've had Manhunter comes out. I think it's middlingly successful. I don't think it was a flop. It definitely wasn't a big hit, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm going to say, 5, 6, 7 years later, whatever it is, they go, we want to do something else with this. Let's not, like, to your point, let's not remake it. Let's make Silence of the Lambs. And it's a great movie. It's literally, to your point, it's like, expand the world. Don't just remake the film.
Luckily, they had a helping hand with the world is already there to be expanded upon, because they got the novels.
We've got this cat. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where remakes and reboots reboots are something quite different, because often the reason why you're rebooting something is because you've got to a point where you've lost a good section of your audience. You know, the X-Men films.
Well, I mean, we're sitting here talking as in a world where Indiana Jones 5 exists now. You know, I don't need to see that film. No offense to anyone, I'm gonna watch it again, like we always come back to. I know I'm gonna go watch it in the cinema, time willing. I have zero good faith that I'm gonna. I don't think I'll hate it. I'm not like that. I'll go, see what you go for. You know, and I don't want to be. Oh, he's too old, but he's quite old. You know, I don't want to. I think you
got it right first time.
Yeah.
He's too old.
Yeah.
You know,
I think he's in his 80s, and I know they want to, and I get it. Like, I get they want to wrap it up. It was wrapped up in 3. It was wrapped up in Last Crusade, and they brought it back, and I saw that at the cinema, and I own it, and I watched it reasonably recently. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I don't think it's
not as bad as I remember.
It's not as bad as I think the backlash was at the time.
Yeah, I think it was unfairly handled. But when they reboot stuff, so the Evil Dead reboot that I watched starts off, first 5 minutes or so it's like, they might be onto something.
The reboot, because the reboot was 2018. I
remember the last one that came out.
I think it was as close to the original as you're going to get in a modern way, in the sense of the premise is essentially exactly the same.
I don't know if this is a direct sequel to that remake. You might be right. I can't really remember what happened. I know I preferred that version of the Evil Dead, but you get to the point where you're like, well, Evil Dead is iconic for many reasons, you know. One of them is Bruce Campbell. Much like Indiana Jones, Bruce Campbell may have aged out of convincingly playing Ash. They explore this in the TV series to great effect. Wasn't a huge hit. So you're looking at this IP going, well, people don't want a reboot because they want Bruce Campbell. We gave them Bruce Campbell. They didn't really want that either. And maybe that's the problem with the TV show rather than Bruce Campbell playing Ash. I don't know. You know, I thought it was pretty good, the TV show, as it goes. So I went in with low expectations, hoping it was going to be good. The first sort of 5 minutes of it opens up, and they might be onto something here. They then they change the setup, so it's in an almost abandoned apartment block in the middle of a blackout sort of thing. And I'm like, I respect what you're doing here. I genuinely do. You're not just going to go Evil Dead with women or Evil Dead in a house, in an apartment block. They're trying to do something different. They're trying to make it make sense, and it's for the most part a good movie, visually stunning. There's just something off with it. It's just something, it doesn't quite land right that I can't put my finger on, but it starts and ends and it ties up really nicely, and it's ready for another sequel if you want one and all of this stuff. And I applaud what they're going for, because they were trying something else. It's played very straight. There are laughs in it, but it's played very straight. I will gladly rewatch it so I can reassess it, because you, even with low expectations, you go in expecting something, don't you? You know, and it's hard. Like, I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. I got the figures over there. You know what I mean? It's like, Army of Darkness is a great movie. So remaking stuff is difficult to do well, and we've all been disappointed so many times.
I also think as well, when not so much of remakes, but with a long period between one sequel and another, and they return back to it, is, I'm particularly looking at the Terminator franchise, is they're not bold enough to let go of what was successful about the others. So Schwarzenegger shouldn't have been in a Terminator film since
the second.
You could just about get away with him being in Terminator 3.
Yeah, but it's not good.
It's not good. I'm not saying it's a good film.
Yeah.
But
I can conceptually you could get away with it.
I can understand him being in there.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be in another Terminator film ever. But people don't want to let that go. They want to, we've got Arnie here.
Got to have Arnie.
And it's yeah, but Arnie's too old now. He looks old. He doesn't look like
he looks
killing
great for his age. But
but that's not the first thing you think about when you see a Terminator. Looks great for his age. He's just been made in a factory.
Supplements he's on.
And so I had this concept, and it was before The Rock was kind of where he is now, when he was just making his way of replacing that whole character and have somebody else play that T-1000, or maybe not that model but a different model, and you don't acknowledge Arnold Schwarzenegger at all, because as soon as you acknowledge it, I think now you could do the very similar thing with the actor who plays Reacher in the Prime series.
Right,
he's got that right look of being a big dude, and even in that, there's elements where the way he carries himself. But somebody's got to be bold enough to say, yeah, all this money you're giving to a Terminator film, we're not going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. But that's the pulling power. Yeah, we're not going to have him in it.
Well, we tried that. We had Salvation.
But they didn't, because they still had to have the CGI version on, which,
I'll
don't
be
get
honest,
me wrong,
though,
I thought was really
great moment in that film, innit? Because you're not expecting it at that point. You're like, he's not in it. It's cool. And then 1980s swatch, because it's around the beginning of that face swap kind of technology thing going on. And that moment, I remember that, I viscerally remember that in the cinema, going like, like a child. You know what I mean? Like, amazing.
But with
amazing
that
moment.
Comes some problems in the sense of now we're still expecting, however unlikely it is, to see a Schwarzenegger in that role. And I think
that movie, though, Salvation, that was one of those. It probably wasn't the first time, because obviously this is pre-Star Wars, Disney Star Wars. I was going to say prequels, but the prequels, the pre-Star Wars, Disney requisition of Star Wars in those movies. Jesus, that was harder to say than it should have been.
You were having a bit of a moment there, weren't you?
I'm very tired.
I was about to call the ambulance.
So it's the first time. It's like, I remember everyone saying, everyone has always said they wanted to see a Terminator movie set in the future. So here it is, and everyone, I don't like it. And it's like, I love that movie. I think it's a great movie. I don't know why it gets so panned. I haven't watched it again in a long time. Really loved it when it came out. I think Christian Bale's great in it. It's very dark. I think that's one of the things that people always throw. It's not funny. It's like, well, the first Terminator's not funny. The second one's funny-ish. The third one's hilarious, and it's terrible. You know what I mean? So, and it's that the inability. It was the first time I was aware of the inability to really make the fans happy, because whatever you give them, they decide it's what they don't want. So when you talk about reboot, it's going on a bit long, this, isn't it? When you talk about reboots, I always think of the Aliens. It's not really a reboot. Whenever they came to do an Alien sequel, it's famous for the studio interference, and you hear about the version of Alien 3 that was floating about set on a ship and all of that stuff. So it was a good movie. I'd watch that. And the studio went, no, we're not, mate. It's too expensive. And then the interference. And the amount of times, like I keep saying, the amount of times you've just been disappointed by what ends up on the screen.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, just pulling it back to Beetlejuice, I'd be asking the question, okay, you're going to do a sequel, or you're going to return to the franchise in some facet in a film format. Who's it for?
Yeah,
who are you making
audience?
it for? Yeah. Because if you're making it for the people who like the original,
they're not going to like it.
Because they're not. You may get a few of them, but the vast majority are going to say, they didn't need to touch that. If you're trying to do it for a new audience, do something different with the same world, because they've got nothing to compare it to.
Especially when you think how little Beetlejuice is in that movie.
It's not
the
hard to replace
him and keep
in
that
Silence of the Lambs, isn't it? Like 10 minutes, if that, total runtime.
It's not hard to keep that world open without him. I'm not saying he doesn't have to be in it, but exactly, I get your point. It's like
you could have nods to it.
You have to service the fans without them telling you you're pandering to them. It's a tightrope that no one can walk. You know what I mean? And in the age of the internet, even if you get it dead right, millions of people can tell you got it dead wrong anyway. So.
Yeah, so as I say, I always come back to the, why, who's it for, what's the purpose of it? And obviously I understand to make money, but beyond that, what's the purpose of it? What are you trying to achieve? Oh, we think there's more to this story than there's let on.
Yeah, we left too much unsaid. There's still, there's still
I
something
remember
to expand. Yeah.
About 5 or 6 years after Inception came out, there was a very loose rumour that they were going to do Inception 2. But it was going to be without Christopher Nolan or any of the people involved, because in their words, we've told that story. You could explore the world,
retell the same story,
do it in a, doesn't need a sequel,
Yeah, I mean, where can you take that? That is going to be
the classic,
interesting.
Straight to DVD release of Titanic 2.
Was there a Titanic 2?
I'm pretty sure there is. I don't know if
Did it sink again?
I don't know if it's actually a real movie,
or is it just like a famous reference?
It's a famous fake movie that is mentioned in a movie or something. Yeah. But it's that whole.
It wouldn't surprise me. Obviously the famous one's Gladiator 2. It's like he died at the end. Yeah. He's in heaven this time or something. It's like I forget what the plot for Gladiator 2 was supposed to be, but it was ridiculous, and they seriously considered making it. It sometimes is baffling, and it's beyond you.
So I think long and short, what we're kind of saying is that we're not totally opposed to a new film in the universe. Perhaps a direct sequel may be the wrong direction to go in. I would love them to get it right. I can't tell them what getting it right is. I can't say, well, what you need to do is this. I can't see how it can be done, but that doesn't really mean anything. The fact that I can't see it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. And I hope if they do it, I hope it's great. You know what I mean? And
I hope they pull it off.
I think it is one of those IPs where I think there's quite a lot of goodwill. Unfortunately, not to hark on at Star Wars fans, but I think the prequels were doomed before they ever got there, because I think, it's quite notorious that Star Wars fans are quite set in their ways.
It's funny, actually. I was saying, the Dark Fate... Not Dark Fate, sorry. Salvation was the first time I noticed fans being impossible to please fans. Yeah. It's not true, is it? It was the prequels.
Yeah.
But I found the first one difficult to watch. You know what I mean? It's not... But it's funny that they're now being reassessed, and people are like, do you know what? They're not that bad, actually. It makes sense. It's just you saw Star Wars 30 years ago and you're old and bitter now.
And so I think luckily for Beetlejuice there's quite a lot of goodwill. I think a lot of people would welcome it and be like, oh, there's a sequel to that, as opposed to what? How dare they? And that kind of, there will be that. Don't get me wrong. I'm
somewhere in between the two where I just sort of think, but it's because I've been burnt so many times before. Yeah. So good. I hope they pull it off.
Yeah. So
I guess further viewing would be the next bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right off the top of my head, I would say
every Tim Burton movie ever.
I'd say the two Addams Family films, I think, lend themselves.
I had Addams Family. Nice, yeah. This is like bingo now, right?
Very similar in tone, and kind of
100%,
dark kind of comedy. Feel
Christina Ricci, I believe, starred in Mermaids alongside Winona Ryder and Cher.
And as we said earlier, Angelica Houston was apparently in line to potentially play Delia.
Yeah, and Christopher Lloyd, who plays
Lurch. No, not Lurch. Uncle Fester.
Uncle Fester, that's right.
Yeah.
So agreed. I got Addams Family,
and that is another popular franchise that has been made into a musical. So,
yes, and a cartoon or two.
But the cartoon is what started it. It was like from the late
TV
50s.
Show, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was a TV show, wasn't a cartoon, was it?
No,
was it cartoon first.
It was a
because the TV shows. It was a famous thing, right?
A newspaper cartoon.
From like a comic strip.
Yeah,
sort of
comic strip from the 50s or 60s. Because what was it? We were watching.
Yeah, but the TV show's from like the 50s, though, right?
Yeah, we were watching Wednesday, which is obviously a modern interpretation of it.
Jenna Ortega,
and I was going, how long has this IP, this world existed? And I was surprised at how long it. For me, it started with the TV show, or
because the TV show that I'm aware of is from the 50s, I think, like maybe 6. But then you had the Monsters, which I always preferred.
Yeah.
I have the box set of that as well. I love the Monsters.
Which has also been remade by Rob Zombie.
Oh my God, it is, isn't it? That's right. Yeah.
Save yourself. Don't go and watch it. I've seen a trailer. That's all you need to see.
I'm going to watch that after we do this.
I really wouldn't.
I'm going to watch it.
I think you're angry enough. I don't think you need to watch.
Bitter already.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Addams Family's good. Cool. Batman's. I actually wrote Batman 2 rather than Batman 1, but I've read the Tim Burton Batman.
I think you'll find it's called Batman Returns.
I think you'll find it's the Batmans. I like the Batmans.
Have you got that Batmans?
All right, watching that Batmans. Have you got the Batmans too? You know, the one with the funny little fella in it.
How many killings?
How many killings? Saying it. Stealing other people's material now. I think it's fair game. Basically, Tim Burton movies, Ed Wood, explores similar themes. Very different movies, but it's similar themes of innocence. You know, Ed Wood is portrayed by Johnny Depp as a very sort of naive and idealistic kind of person, and he just want to make good movies, and it's like brings everyone that childhood innocence throughout. Funny enough, I've got The Lost Boys written down here, even though it's a very different movie. It has a very similar sort of feel-good effect on me, so I might be slightly blinded by that. Edward Scissorhands. Sorry, I can't say that movie. Can I say this on this podcast? That, you know, Viz, the comic, we might have to cut this bit out, but you know, Viz, the comic, it was like a comic book for adults I think it still goes like the 90s. It had like, it was inappropriate jokes kind of comic book strips.
I see where this is going.
And it had an advert in there when that movie, I remember around my mate's house, he had a copy of it, and it was Edward Dildo Fingers. He's got an Ann Summers party on the end of his wrists. And they'd superimposed dildos onto Johnny Depp's hands. And
wow.
I cannot think of Edward Scissorhands without thinking of Edward Dildo Fingers.
Yeah, I think we might have to
Are we going to cut
bit.
this? Well, I'll do. We'll cut it out and maybe I'll stick it on at the end and see if anyone makes it that far. Also, I wrote down...
If you say Edward Dildo Hands...
Also, Tim Burton, the Edward Dildo Fingers. Tim Burton masterpiece, Edward Dildo Fingers. I was just going to keep saying Edward Dildo Fingers.
This podcast has literally turned into two men just amusing themselves.
Fucking for 2.5 hours of nonsense.
We've forgotten about any listeners we may have.
Right, okay. I'm just going to leave Edward Dildo Fingers out. I can't do it. I can't do it. Also, Heathers, the film, Winona Ryder film.
Also a popular musical.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. I've not seen it, but the music's pretty good.
Yeah,
music's
pretty good. I thought it's similar. It's a bit more darker. I've also written. I was quite pleased with this one. Was the Witches of Eastwick.
Yeah, good links there. That makes sense. Another one
similar
just
sort of movie.
hit upon for me. A little bit more light-hearted, but Hocus Pocus.
I've never seen it, but cool. Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not again. That's one they've got and made in not into a musical, but they've recently remade. I've not seen the remake.
Right. It's got what's her name? Is it Barbara Streisand?
No.
What's her name? It's not Barbara Streisand.
Wind Beneath My Wings woman.
Yeah, her.
Not Barbara Streisand, no, is it?
It's the other.
Bette Midler.
I was going to say the other one.
To be fair, the other one, if you say Barbara Streisand, is pretty accurate. Bette Midler.
Like they're twinned in my mind. They're very show tunes, movie actors who did show tunes as well. Yeah. Any other movies? I wrote down Gremlins as well, just because of it's a similar vein. Its subject matter is completely different, visually very different, but it just popped in my head. I was like, it's Gremlins-esque, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, all I could really think of was the Addams Family. That was the kind of the first things that kind of popped into my
Probably
head.
be closer with Gremlins 2 than Gremlins 1. Yeah. But I think we're reaching a bit. I think I peaked at Witches of Eastwick, and I should have stopped talking then.
In space, no one can hear you podcast.
So that was Bury Our Bones With for this week. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us in all the usual social media places as Bury Our Bones With. So please do come by, say hi and send us your comments. Until next time, I've been Jimmy Murphy, he's been Ryan Everington, and this has been Bury Our Bones With Beetlejuice.
And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just scroll back and read it. You're talking, when we're doing it, I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You listen to it back,
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?
Do you want to try that again? Hang on, I need a response. Because you're saying that, I was like, well, we were going to do it for Halloween, and then we decided to do something else for Halloween, but we already had it queued. I'd already bought the DVD. I suppose that's the answer. I don't have an answer to that question. Why are we doing this movie? Why did I pick this movie? I thought it was good.